Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now is Florida Representative Rich Workman, Republican from Melbourne, and the chair of the Florida Legislature's Finance and Tax Committee. And State Representative Workman, thanks so much for being with us today.
Kathleen, thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate you.
Well, you recently raised questions about a world history textbook in Florida for advanced placement students, which you say puts an inaccurate spin on Islam at the expense of Christians and Jews. Can you share with us your concerns? And is there a pro-Islam bias in state schools?
Well, I can't answer that second question if there's a pro-Islam bias in state schools. All I can answer to is that this book went out of its way not to offend one category of human being. It reports history as history when it talks about the Crusades or the good and bad of the Roman Catholic Church, or when one city or another was conquered by the Jews, and it talks about how there were massacres followed and death and horrible atrocities in the name of Jesus Christ or the Jewish God. But when it moves into Islam, it's very careful on what words it uses. It goes into great detail on the Quran, it goes into great detail on the 5 pillars of Islam, it goes into great detail on how Islam made equality among women, but it stopped short of saying the word massacre. But history is history, and history was clear that when Muhammad took Medina, those that did not convert were massacred. This book doesn't say that. This book actually says that they joyfully followed Muhammad, whereas reporting to the Crusades, Kathleen, it says that once the Christians took over Jerusalem, massacres followed. It's a warping of history in order not to offend, and that, quite frankly, offends me.
Right, and so you're saying that this book paints a more flattering portrait of Islam than it does Christianity and Judaism.
Right. If you read this book just without any preconceived bias, you will see that it is very careful not to offend, and that is offensive. History is offensive. Heck, if we're not offended by it, we're doomed to repeat it. Just state it as fact, and please don't use colorful, flowery words to avoid offending one category while using correct historical factual words in order to portray history on the other side.
According to published reports, Pearson plc, which published the book, confirms that the book has a chapter titled Muslim Civilizations, but claims that balanced attention is given to the beliefs of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. What do you make of the publisher's response?
Well, I'm happy to say the publishers agreed to a conference call with me, and I'm actually having that immediately following this interview. And they're going to answer me to that, because I will tell you that this page that I'm looking at, that I'll show you, your cameraman, in a minute, is the 5 pillars of Islam. I learned through this book the 5 pillars of Islam. I will not learn in this book what the 10 Commandments say, for those of us who might be Christian. I will also learn quotes from the Quran, an entire page dedicated to quotes from the Quran. You will not see a single quote in this book from any other Bible, from any other religion. The list goes on, Kathleen, and they're going to answer to me why they felt it's so important to go into such detail on Islam while completely skimming over Christianity, Judaism, and all others.
And we look forward to hearing about your findings. An attorney for the Florida Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, told an Orlando television station that he believes that you and other critics of the textbook want to create an environment of intolerance toward Muslims and an environment of hate against Islam. What do you make of that statement?
I am so sick of hearing that. Is it because I am a white Christian I am not allowed to point out a biased book when it's not biased in my favor? Does that make me some kind of bigot? The fact is, this book is bigoted because this book only wanted to not offend one particular group. This book is the one that is bigoted, not me. I simply want my kids to learn history exactly the way history happened. I want my kids to know all the warts and disgusting things that my faith did through the ages. I want them to know all the horrible things that took place, whether it was the Christian Crusades or the Jews or the Muslims. They're horrible atrocities in the name of their God. Then teach it that way. Don't sugarcoat one of them because you're afraid they might complain that you were mean to their Muhammad.
I understand you're considering legislation that would cut down on this alleged bias in Florida state schools. Can you update us on this?
I can. In a streamlining effect, Florida legislature reduce the amount of input citizens have to what textbooks we approve on a state level. I'm going to very specifically and very pointedly put public input back in. If this state is going to approve books like this, I want people to know beforehand. I want the public to have input so that others like me, look, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a history scholar, but I can read this book and I know that one group is being called massacres and the other ones are not, yet the atrocities are the same. But in this book, they were very careful not to offend, and that offends me, and we're going to make sure that the public has input in the future, because obviously this was overlooked or ignored.
And Representative, while we have you, I'd like to get your quick take on some other stories making headlines. In a recent interview with the Associated Press, the Reverend Jesse Jackson stood by his remarks when he described Florida as the Selma of our time and an apartheid state in the wake of the George Zimmerman verdict. Now, Florida Governor Rick Scott has asked Jesse Jackson to apologize for the remarks, but the Reverend says he will not. How do you view this? And does Florida need a special legislative session to review the Stand Your Ground law?
First of all, Zimmerman had nothing to do with Stand Your Ground law. You know that. Jesse Jackson knows that. I'm sure Jesse Jackson has made a lot of money on this. He's certainly, I'm sure, got his name ID way up on the charts, which is what he wanted to do, which is why he makes those inflammatory comments. I think he's probably disappointed there wasn't a race war as a result. He, to me, is a disgusting output of what was a trial between over a horrible catastrophe. It had nothing to do with race. Jesse Jackson has brought race into this. He wants to see a race war for his own financial benefit or for whatever benefit it is. I think that he is part of the problem and certainly not part of the solution.
Florida was hit hard by the recession, which technically ended 4 years ago, but now the statewide employment has neared its pre-recession size, topping 8.75 million. Can you give us an update on Florida's fiscal picture? You
know what? We've been working really hard for, I got elected originally in 2008, and every year we've cut the state budget, and every year we've added hundreds of thousands of jobs by reducing the burden on our corporations, by reducing the burden of taxes on our citizens. And as a result, we're ranked one of the top states for businesses, and they are coming here. Hertz just announced they're relocating the headquarters from a high-tax state to Florida. We're pulling business from California, and Governor Rick Scott said he'd create 700,000 jobs, or bring 700,000 jobs to the state in his 7 years, and by God, he's well on track to do that. This is a great state to work, and it's a great place to have your business, and I think that shows by our unemployment numbers being cut, with the exception of Texas, the fastest in the nation, and we're well below the national average. So I'm real proud of what Florida's done. We paid down debt. We have kept our AAA bond rating. We have the lowest per capita state employee to citizen ratio of the state. We are a fiscally conservative state, and we are, by George, going to make that known to all that wish to know it.
And healthcare remains a huge issue in the Sunshine State. Florida is now rejecting $51 billion in federal funds tied to the Affordable Care Act to expand Medicaid. Is this a wise move?
We already spend about 40% of our budget on healthcare related, and Medicaid being the vast majority of that. Since my tenure in office, it's gone up over $5 billion in what we spend on Medicaid. What President Obama asked the states to do by expanding Medicaid, in Florida specifically, we would have expanded Medicaid to 1.1 million more citizens. 900,000 of those citizens would be able-bodied men and women. Able-bodied meaning not mentally or physically handicapped, those without children, not senior citizens, able-bodied men and women without kids. That's universal health care. That's not Medicaid. Medicaid is for those that it's a safety net. President Obama wants to expand it in order to have universal health care, and that's something that Florida is not going to do. We draw the line in the sand in offering Medicaid to able-bodied men and women. If they can't afford health insurance, we're going to try to get more jobs in the state. We're going to help them get back on their feet, but we're not going to give them universal health care. So we're going to stand very firm on that. We're not going to expand Medicaid in this state if expanding Medicaid means universal health care. And that's what it means currently, and that's something we're not buying.
And last question for you, Representative. There's a grassroots campaign for a state constitutional amendment that would legalize marijuana for medicinal purposes. Signature gathering has begun on this. Would you like to see this on the 2014 Florida ballot?
Well, we've just met, Kathleen, but I'm going to tell you that what makes me really upset about that initiative is it has very little, if anything, to do with marijuana for medical purposes. It has everything to do to topple Rick Scott and bring a Democrat into the governor's mansion. This is dirty, stinky politics at its worst. The Democratic Party knows that they need to get the youth vote out. They need to get certain people that typically don't vote out, and they can do that by putting marijuana on the ballot. And I think they think that'll turn the tide for their candidate, who's yet to be named, but we all know who we're talking about. And I believe that this is kind of a sideshow that I really hope the voters see through, and they realize that people that suffer with major illnesses are being used as pawns in this political game to beat a Republican, not by having debates and a standoff and a debate on the issues, but by bringing in a third-party issue that will bring out other voters who will typically, therefore, then vote Democrat. And I just think it's disgusting, and I hope it's very visible to all that see it and that it doesn't work.
Let's say Rick Scott were to face former Florida Governor Charlie Crist for the gubernatorial election. Do you see Rick Scott holding on to his position?
Well, I will tell you that he certainly deserves it. Now, Rick Scott and I have had our odds. He vetoed a very major piece of my legislation that I sponsored that had passed the House and Senate, but he did it for his own reasons, and he has the power to veto. So we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I will tell you that he's done exactly what he said he would do. He'd bring back jobs, he'd get Florida back to work, and he has done just that. He's cut red tape, he's helped us cut taxes. Every day he's somewhere in the state welcoming a new company, relocating to the state. So if a governor elected in the heart of recession after hundreds of thousands of jobs had left the state, after record debt, if the governor turns that around to hundreds of thousands of jobs created, lowering the unemployment rate and bringing down debt and putting away money in the reserve fund, if that governor can't get reelected, I don't know who can. So I think that he'll beat any comers, and I think that Charlie Crist had his shot, and he came up short.
All right, Representative Rich Workman, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.